Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Adrian. Today we are doing a should I read of the Teixcalaan Duology by Arkady Martine. I believe that is how you pronounce it. I looked up the pronunciation guide at the back of A Desolation Called Peace, so I hope I said that right. So for those of you who don't know, a quick synopsis. This is a duology, a two-book series, starting with A Memory Called Empire, followed by A Desolation Called Peace. In it, we follow Mahit, who is a young woman from a mining colony on the outskirts of a big empire, the Teixcalaan Empire. It is a station which is politically independent from the empire. It has its own rule. It is much smaller and sort of seen as unimportant. But she is the new ambassador sent from Lascelles Station, her home, to the Empire of Teixcalaan, where she is replacing the former ambassador who has died under suspicious circumstances. We follow her and 3 Seagrass, who is someone who works for the Empire, who is part of the Information Ministry, and who is assigned to basically help her perform her duties. And that is the setup for the start of the first book. A Memory Called Empire did win the Hugo Award for Best Novel. It's also been nominated for the Arthur C. Clarke Award, so very critically acclaimed is A Memory Called Empire, the first book in this series. A Desolation Called Peace only came out at the beginning of 2021, so it is a new release, and that's where we're at with this series so far. As I often do with the Should I Read series, I'm going to try and give you some positives and some negatives as to why you may or may not enjoy this series, and I hope that gives you a good understanding of what you're going to be getting into. It will be spoiler free, but hopefully it will help you realise if this is a series that you are going to want to pick up and jump into, or whether it may not be for you. Firstly, let's jump in with the positives. The first thing I want to say is that I really love the way Arkady Martine writes her characters, particularly Mahit and as well 3 Seagrass. I think they are very well realised. I think that Mahit in particular I really connected with. I felt that I understood her. A Memory Called Empire is almost exclusively, I think it probably is exclusively from Mahit's viewpoint, and I do feel like I really understood her. I understand what's going on when she's struggling with her identity, who she is, as she is trying to deal with the political ramifications of what's happened. Although she is a very competent character, she is very inexperienced, so there is plenty of political wrangling that's happening that she is not amazingly well equipped for, even though she is a very competent character. I do think the way she ingratiates herself to the Empire's culture, the way that she works her way in and understands and gets to know people is very interesting. I think that her fascination with linguistics and sort of there's a very poetic side to the Teixcalaan Empire, and I think her interest in that is portrayed very well. It comes across to me as a reader very well, and I think she's a very interesting character, and I think that's true for some of the other side characters as well, whether that being 3 Seagrass or some of the other characters we get. So I do really enjoy the characterization that Arkady Martine has in both these books. Somewhat related to that is going to be my first negative. Now, Mahit and our other sort of main characters are proactive. They do things, they want to be involved, and they are pushing the plot forward often. However, they are not the big movers and shakers in this world, in this universe. There are people much bigger, in much more powerful positions than they are. And again, this is spoiler free, so I'm not going to talk too much about endings or anything like that. But in lots of ways, they are cogs in a bigger machine. And what that does mean is that sometimes some of the big things that happen are a little bit outside of our main character's control. We don't necessarily get a we don't necessarily get a close perspective on the things that are happening. We get a slightly more outside view sometimes. And for some people, you might think that this doesn't really give you the perspective you want. You want to be in the head of the prime mover. And unfortunately, we don't really get that. Now, I do think that a lot of this duology, a lot of this series is about following the characters and understanding where they're going. So it wasn't a big deal breaker for me at all, but be aware of that coming in, that there is much more going on. They are small cogs in a big machine. So just be aware of that as you go in. My second positive I want to get to is that the theming in these books is absolutely on point. This is true for book one, but particularly shone out for me in A Desolation Called Peace, book two. I think the themes that Arkady Martine deals with are brilliant. I think she weaves them in very well. Some of them are quite on the nose, others of them are much more subtle, and actually together they can hit the same theme in an obvious way and then in a more subtle undercurrent, and I think that's done very, very well, particularly in book two. Some of these themes are about memory, about legacy, about individuality, about your identity as a person and an individual. Really good themes, addressed really well. She's never heavy-handed and very subtle with the way that these are introduced and these are dealt with, and I think the themes are some of the really strong parts of this series. Something that we often see in science fiction books is really strong theming, and I think that is definitely a very positive thing for this series, a very big pro in the good camp for this series. As I am saying that I think the theming is strong, particularly in book two, I think book two does change quite a lot, however, and this is going to be one of my negatives here, is that if you really enjoy the style and the setup of book one, book two is quite a change. So in book one, we do follow Mahit almost exclusively in her point of view. Book two, in A Desolation Called Peace, is very much more an ensemble cast. We do still follow Mahit very closely, along with Three Seagrass, but we get the perspective of many other characters. Now this is true just in terms of the perspectives we get, the point of views, who we follow, as well as that we do get some interludes interspersed throughout the chapters, and in these we get short little snippets of multiple other characters. So it is quite different, and if you really want to continue that deep entrenched following along with Mahit and inside her head, we do get that a bit less of that in book two, but we do get to understand some of the side characters much more. I'm obviously not going to say who, because I don't want you to know who lives and who dies, but yeah, there is a lot of a wider spread of perspective and understanding of what's going on, and I think that's can be a really good thing. But I think for a lot of people, if you loved book one, that's going to be quite a change going into book two, particularly if, like me, you read them back to back. And then on to my third positive. This is also going to be my third negative, so this depends on what you like. So for me, this was a big positive. I think this series has political manoeuvring done right. This is what a politics-heavy book should look like, to my mind. There are border disputes, there is unknown loyalties, there are people being deceptive, both for good and bad reasons. We don't always get to understand what's going on in other people's heads. We follow our characters and we know what they're thinking, and I think this series is very much politics done right. However, if you want an action-packed series, if you want fast-paced, if you want bombastic, exciting, this might not be your series. This is a very much more slower-paced political intrigue, particularly that intrigue in book one, but then just dealing with the political ramifications of what is going on is such a large part of book two. It is very politics-heavy, it is very intrigue-heavy. There are the odd fast-paced action scenes, but they are few and far between. So if you're coming in wanting a popcorn sci-fi like thriller, this isn't it. This series is not it. This series is much more slow-paced, it is thoughtful, it is thought-provoking, it is very politically based and politics-heavy. So all in all, it very much depends on what you are wanting out of your sci-fi. This is not action-packed and bombastic often, but it does really address good themes. It's well thought through, very interesting, slow burn political sci-fi. For me, that was wonderful. I gave both these books 5 stars. This is going on to my top 10 series list. I absolutely love it, but your mileage may vary depending on what you want in your sci-fi. So go in knowing that, or don't go in knowing that. If you think that that's not for you and you don't want to pick up the series, that's fine. But if that is something you enjoy, I would very much compare this to what I've said about the Long Price Quartet, about it being a slow build. I don't think it's got quite the epic payoff at the end that that series does, but I do think it has the same brilliant theming, and it does work through this politics in a slow-paced way that I found very, very enjoyable. I hope that that's given you a bit of insight into this duology. I hope this helps you make up your mind whether you should pick it up and read it or whether it might be a miss for you. Let me know down below what you think, whether you've read it or whether you're interested to read it from what I've told you about it. If you like this video, don't forget to click like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this kind of content, and hopefully I will see you guys again soon.